series co-sponsored by Google, the Black Project, and the Root and the NAACP. I'm Larry Brown Jr. of the NAACP. I'm on the digital media team here, and I thank you for joining us today for this Pound Time March On conversation. 50 years ago, it's no secret what happened. We marched, and we marched for jobs, and we marched for justice. Today, we will put a period in the conversation that we've had in this four-part installment, and I'd like to start by introducing our guest this evening. First up from the NAACP, we have Joteka Edie, who is the Senior Director of the Voting Rights Initiative, in addition to the Senior Advisor to the President and CEO. From the Black Youth Project, we have Charlene Carruthers. Also from the Black Youth Project, we have Jonathan Likes. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
I want to go, Joteka, I want to go back to you because you are on staff at the NAACP, and I want you to recap what we've seen over these last 7 days. Start with last Saturday and bring us to today.
Well, you know, I'm really just taking it all in and just really sort of thinking back on this moment. And I think if we just really stop and just pause, what we've seen really is resolve. We've seen, yes, commemoration, but more so a call to action. We've seen Americans from all demographics, from all walks of life, young and old, come together to stand on the ground where Dr. King and so many others stood to fight for jobs, justice, and freedom. And today, to look out at the mall and see, I know it had to have been at least 250,000 people who just came to stand where others stood today 50 years ago, is something that, you know, I feel very emotional right now just thinking about it. Just thinking about the historic nature, the shoulders for which we stand on today. Yes, we've come very far, and yes, there's so much more work to be done. But to sit on those steps today, and all through this week to hear elder after elder talk about the fight, to hear Representative John Lewis today say things have changed and we've come a long way, and to hear the echo from our president say what we must keep marching on is a really beautiful day, and it's very emotional for me personally. I think it's emotional for a lot of people, but I think there's a lot of resolve to continue and do what Dr. King said 50 years ago, take this back to the states.
Charlene, tell me, what does this mean to you as Charlene Carruthers, having taken part in all that we celebrated and experienced, and as a member of the Black Youth Project?
So, for me, as a member of the Black Youth Project 100, this past weekend this past week of celebrations and commemorations has been awesome, just for the opportunity to recognize what our elders and our ancestors have contributed to the history, not just of Black people, but also the history of this world. But it's also a little bittersweet. On Saturday, I was a part of a group, the Black Youth Project 100 and the Dream Defenders, the Ohio Students Association, and we brought energy to the march that wasn't present in other spaces in the march. The young people marching in with chants and songs talking about building power, and that wasn't necessarily reflected from the speakers on the podium, with the exception of a few. Primarily a young man by the name of Philip Agnew, who's the executive director of the Dream Defenders. Today, at the actual commemoration of the march, I was excited to see Philip and also Sophia from United We Dream speak on behalf of not just the Dream Defenders and United We Dream, but on the behalf of all young people. And so I'm highly dismayed about the fact that they were cut from the program, from the speaker program. And so for me, the march is what happened at the march today is a clear call to action for young people to continue to rise up and not just take leadership, because we already are leaders, but to bring more young people into the fold and really organize around the issues that matter to us.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Charlene. And I think that's a great time to pivot into our overall discussion topic tonight, where we will discuss the outcomes of these marches. What will happen? How can we do what the president said today, awaken the long slumbering conscience of Americans, and take it a step further, Jonathan, the long slumbering conscience of young people?
I mean, absolutely. I think that one of the things I struggle with this weekend was that are we celebrating? And of course we're celebrating in some sense, but I think in another sense, a lot of young people are angry and felt like when that verdict came out, when the Zimmerman verdict came out, they felt like, okay, March on Washington will represent a time where I can come and express the anger I feel and the marginalization that I experience in my life every day. And I think a lot of people came here this weekend and came here today and left feeling like in some way that things are going to continue business as usual, unfortunately. So I think now it's up to young people to take that anger and actually organize around direct action. I was encouraged to be in a meeting on Sunday night with the Dream Defenders, with Generational Alliance, with the Advancement Project, and see a young contingent of youth activists organizing in different places in the country, coming together and building coalition to say, what will the future look like? What 50 years from now, when my kids go to the 100th anniversary of the March on Washington, what will our world look like? And hopefully it's not just business as usual.
Charlene, I want to talk about how young people can take that direct action. I mean, the Black Youth Project, a lot of eyes have been on BYP 100 the weekend that the Zimmerman verdict was handed out. I recall very vividly being in Orlando, Florida at the 104th convention of the NAACP, and I know what happened on the ground in Orlando and what our association, our family experienced. Talk about what you all experienced and how you took direct action to inspire someone else to join the movement.
My goodness, Larry. Every time I talk about this, I have lots of feelings. But what came out of it was that we had a group of young people from BYP 100 go downtown Chicago and organize the rally. Like, they led the rally in downtown Chicago. And we had a group of young people stay back, and we released a video statement, which to date has over 23,000 views on YouTube. We've created a Justice for Trayvon toolkit that you can find on the website and on social media. And we also brought a contingency of young people to the March on Washington, the event held on Saturday, not just to attend the march, but to also set forth our vision and our mission and our core values as an organization. And so it was a clear call to action to build a network. It wasn't just, go to a rally or go to a march, but how are we going to build an actual force, a body of power for Black youth activists in this country. And so anyone who's interested in being involved, it's a clear call to action towards that exact goal. And we do this in solidarity with organizations like the Dream Defenders, the youth in the NAACP, and the youth of color and other organizations. That's important to us as we move forward.
Thanks, Charlene. Joteka, for so long, for almost 80 years, the youth and young adults of the NAACP have been on the ground, fired up, ready to go. And I want you to speak to the level of activism that's required in 2013 and why it's important for us to realize what the president said in his speech. I want to quote him. He said that we will dishonor those heroes as well to suggest that the work of this nation is somehow complete. The arc of the moral universe may bend towards justice, but it doesn't bend on its own. To secure the gains of this country it will require vigilance and not complacency. Speak to the youth and young adults of the NAACP never being complacent and why it's so important for people to plug in somewhere to activate a network.
I think it's absolutely important, and I think what the president said today was really a call to action. And really, I think the most important aspect of what has happened over the last several days, this was not just a commemoration, it was a call to action. But what is most important is that there has been an underlining thread that if we come to Washington or if we gather on the Mall and we hear inspirational speeches, that's great. But if we don't go back home and we don't actually do the work, then we do an injustice to all of those who marched, who struggled, who came before all of us were even born. And I think that's what's very important. I think that's what the president was saying today. He was very clear that we've got to be active. We are in a major assault on voting rights in our country. We have stand your ground laws, as some speakers said today, that result in many people being buried in the ground. We are in a situation where black unemployment is skyrocketing, and black jobs in black communities and urban communities are flatlined. Our communities and our environments are degraded every single day, and we're dying at epidemic proportions from the lack of equal access to health care. So there is still so much work to be done. And if we rest on our laurels and if we go home and just have in our hands our memorabilia, our ticket, our program, or the thing that we're going to pull out 50 years from now and say, I was there, then we do no justice for those who marched and fought. Because those who came 50 years ago, they came, there was no text messaging, there was no internet, there was a risk of dying for coming. People got on buses that came from Mississippi, didn't know if their homes were going to be there when they came back. So they went to Washington 50 years ago with a much more consequences that could have been facing them. You know, there are not many people going to face those same consequences when they go home. They'll be congratulated for being in Washington for the last few weeks. But if we don't do what they did 50 years ago under those circumstances that actually work, do the work that the Black Youth Project is doing, that the NAACP is doing, and that a lot of organizations and groups of people, you don't have to be a part of an organization to actually make a difference in your community. And so that's why we've got to make sure that we're registering people to vote, that we're educating our communities about these issues, that we're putting our bodies where our politic is, like the young people, the Dream Defenders in Florida, and those with Moral Mondays in North Carolina. It is time for us to take and carry this movement forward. That is how we create change in our community, and that is how we're going to make sure that we realize Dr. King's dream.
Jonathan, I want to ask you, why is it important? What to you, what is the symbolism of marching? We're in 2013, and in 63, it was cool to march. It was the thing to do. But today, people ask, why march? Why do we march? And as a member of BYP100, why do you feel it's important to march?
Absolutely. I mean, I just think marching is one of the highest forms of protest. I think it's literally using, and if you think about the black body in America, how it's been marginalized, how it's been beaten, how it's been killed and murdered over time, I think we have really come to a place where we want to articulate a position where we are physically using our bodies to stand up and make positions and show people that we are going to have our voice heard. So I think that there has often been in the 21st century a staleness to marching. People say, oh, when they think of marching, they think of hell no, we won't go, or hell no. And there's a boring, like, we don't want to do that. But what I see from these new emerging, and I don't even want to say emerging, what I see from these youth movements that are literally taking the streets is an energy that I have not seen before. What I see is a vigor and passion and a zeal that hasn't been seen in a few generations at least, that probably hasn't been seen since the original civil rights movement going back to the 50s and 60s. And when you feel that energy and it spreads like wildfire, and people who would never wanted to be involved in a movement, in activism, in community organizing, and in direct action, I think that's the energy that is spreading now. So that taking it to the streets is that energy being manifested and being spread, so that people know we ready and we coming.
We ready and we coming, says Jonathan. I want to welcome to the conversation as well Dr. Ivory Tolson from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Ivory, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me turn to you for a moment while we've got a few minutes left in this conversation. As in regard to the work that you do, what does, how can you parallel the March of '63 to the March of 2013?
Yeah. I want to first thank you for inviting me here, and I did get a chance to listen to the dialogue over the last 15 minutes, even though I had some trouble logging on. And one thing I can say is you guys are fired up. I almost didn't want to get on because I was enjoying listening to you all so much.
We needed you in the
Um,
conversation. We needed you in the conversation.
yeah, but one of the things I think is important is for us to really be able to understand the history so that we understand the place that we're at right now. Um, it's interesting that we refer to what happened 50 years ago as the March on Washington, when I'm sure the people around that time was referring to it as the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And I don't think that they cut that off in general speech back then. They were well aware that they were fighting for jobs and freedom. And that probably was more important for them to say and echo than the March on Washington. And I think that speaks to some ways in which history gets a little distorted. Um, I think that the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom back then was a movement about social change, and they had a very bold vision for how they wanted to recreate society. And they wanted to recreate society in a way that there was full access to employment, that there was radical changes in the way that we administer social services, where everyone who's poor gets a meal, where there's a safety net for everybody, and there was full access to all the rights and privileges in this nation. I think that today there's the same ideas, but it becomes a little diffuse in the way that we speak about it. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the fact that we're not as connected to history in the way that we should be. I'm 40 years old, so I see myself as kind of between the old generation and the younger generation. I do agree with some of the previous statements that the young generation have some tools at their disposal. They have energy and they have a sophistication to the way that they manage this that hadn't been seen in the history of the world. Um, but I think where we differ is that a lot of the young people they like information in small bites and they like it quick. They like it now. So they're not taking the time to really read and digest books the way that we do. And I see some limitations in that.
Thanks so much, Dr. Tolson. We've got just a little over 2 minutes left in this conversation, everyone. And I want you all to really encourage someone and at least, I mean, we can't say like Twitter 140 characters or less, but try to get it in 2 sentences or less. How can people engage beyond today? Folks are saying, okay, I'm still stirred up. You've told me that I should engage. Now, how do I engage? Where do I plug in? Where do I go? Charlene, we'll start with you.
First, follow BYP_100 on Twitter and tweet us if you are interested. Second, for anyone, regardless of how old you are or how young you are, prioritize young leaders as a center of the movement. We honor our elders, we understand our history, and that any movement that doesn't center young people is a movement without a conscience. And in order to actually build a movement that we need, we have to value our young people and not devalue what they know and what they don't know, and understand that we can do this work and we will do this work to free all people.
Thank you, Charlene. Jonathan, we'll go to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really just comes down to young people can no longer wait for someone else to come in and pass a torch to us. We have to be engaged and be active, and we have to start our own movements. At the end of the day, our freedom depends on it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Joteka?
I just simply would say that, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? If we really want to make a change, we have to make that change and start in our local community. Join an organization, join the NAACP or any organization that's doing good work to change in your community. Or if there is no organization, get with a group of people and be the change that you want to seek in our community right now, today. I think that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and yes, we have to be our own leaders because that is what they expect of us. But I think very importantly, it's very important that we are very clear that we don't want to have 50 years from now still this attack on voting rights and stand your ground law still pervasive all throughout our nation. and be the most incarcerated generation that we've ever had on the planet. And then also to continue to see all the things that are plaguing our community. That let's pledge to carry this movement forward. Let's pledge to do the work, and let's pledge to join together to make sure that we realize Dr. King's dream and every other dream that our grandparents and great-grandparents and elders and ancestors who dreamed for us as they fought and struggled for us before.
Dr. Ivory Tolton, final word to you.
We need to believe in young people. One of the things that came out of the Trayvon Martin case was we had to defend Trayvon Martin against people who are attacking his character, his substance, for things that were completely illegitimate. I don't see us doing the same thing for young kids before they get killed. I see us quoting bad stats, saying that they're at risk and all these types of things that's putting them in a vulnerable position when they face those teachers in their school that get all of this misinformation from us. So we need to defend young people. We need to let them know, we need to let people who work with them know that they are geniuses, and we need to make sure that they're not victimized in other ways like suspensions and disciplinary referrals and special education classes, psychotropic medications, and all of that.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. Charlene Carruthers, Dr. Ivory Tolton, Joteka Edie, and Jonathan Likes. I want to leave you all with this. Dare to dream different and imagine a better world, not just for yourself, not just for your neighborhood, not just for your nation, but the world at large. Joteka said it before, you can be the change that you want to see. Here at NAACP Connect, we'd like to say that this is the place for you to chart your course, share your story, and ultimately change the world. I invite you to keep that spirit stirred up. Continue these conversations after today. Share all of the chats in the March On series. You can go to YouTube and look up March On, or you can look right in the Google Plus community. Look for # March On. Join the community and also post and let us know how you're doing with your level of activism in your community. Finally, I invite you to pull out your mobile phone and text the word March, MARCH, to 62227. That's the word March to NAACP. I'm Larry Brown Jr. here at the NAACP. Thank you for joining us so much. We'll see you next time.